The afternoon sun cast a golden glow through the large glass windows of the high-end restaurant, reflecting off polished silverware and pristine white tablecloths. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet conversations and the clinking of fine china. Waiters moved swiftly, attending to the well-dressed patrons who expected nothing less than perfection. Anna adjusted her apron and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. It had been a long shift, but she prided herself on keeping her energy up, her smile warm, and her service flawless. She had been working here for almost a year, and in that time she had learned one thing: treat every customer with respect no matter who they were. The door swung open and a man walked in, his presence unassuming yet oddly magnetic. Dressed simply in a fitted sweater and jeans, he carried himself with an effortless confidence. A few heads turned, whispers flitting through the room like a quiet breeze. Some recognized him immediately, their eyes widening, their hands twitching toward their phones. But he didn't seek attention. Instead, he walked calmly to a corner table, choosing the quietest spot in the restaurant. Anna noticed him but didn't react the way others did. She had seen celebrities before, the kind who expected special treatment, who demanded dishes not on the menu, who barely acknowledged the staff as people. But something about this man was different. There was no arrogance, no expectation of privilege, just quiet humility. She approached his table, holding a menu. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Can I get you something to drink while you decide?" Salah looked up, his deep brown eyes warm but reserved. "Just water for now, please." His voice was soft, polite. Anna nodded, returning a genuine smile. "Of course. Take your time." As she walked away, she heard the hushed murmurs of a few customers. A group of businessmen at a nearby table exchanged glances. "That's him, right?" one of them muttered under his breath. "Mohamed Salah," another confirmed. "Guy's a legend. Can't believe he's here." A third man, older, sharper, leaned back in his chair watching Salah with something closer to disapproval. "Football players," he scoffed. "All money, no class." Anna didn't pay them any mind. She had served all kinds of customers, those who respected others, and those who looked down on anyone they deemed beneath them. She wasn't here to judge, just to do her job. Returning to the table, she set down the glass of water. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" Salah glanced at the menu, then up at her. "What do you recommend?" Anna blinked in surprise. She wasn't used to high-profile customers asking for her opinion. Most of them either knew exactly what they wanted or barely acknowledged her presence. "Well," she said, regaining her composure, "if you're in the mood for something light, the grilled sea bass is excellent. If you want something more filling, the filet mignon is our most popular dish." He considered for a moment. "I'll go with the sea bass." "Good choice," she said, scribbling it down with a smile. Salah gave a small nod, as if appreciating her honesty rather than just the suggestion. As Anna turned to walk away, she caught the disapproving stare of the older businessman at the nearby table. His gaze flicked between her and Salah, a smirk curling on his lips as if he found the entire exchange amusing. Anna had no idea that in just a few short hours this man would turn her world upside down. The clink of glasses and the soft murmur of conversations filled the elegant dining room, but at one table near the corner the air was thick with something different: disdain. Seated there was Richard Langford, a man whose name carried weight in corporate circles. He was the type of man who expected deference, who measured a person's worth by their net worth. His suit was crisp, his watch an obscene display of wealth, and his expression? A smirk of superiority. He had been watching the waitress, Anna, interact with the footballer at the nearby table, and the sight of it irritated him more than it should have. He swirled the wine in his glass, his gaze flicking towards Salah, who sat quietly minding his own business. Langford scoffed under his breath. Athletes, overpaid children kicking a ball for a living, worshipped like kings while men like him, men who built empires, who played real games of power, were forced to share spaces with them. It was laughable. He leaned toward the two younger men sitting with him, both eager to stay in his good graces. "Unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. "These celebrities think they're just like the rest of us." One of the men gave a nervous chuckle. "Well, Salah's a pretty big deal. One of the best in the world." Langford snorted. "Is that so? What does that even mean? What has he actually contributed to society? A few goals? Some fancy footwork? I don't see how that's impressive. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried just enough to reach Anna as she passed by, carrying a tray. She clenched her jaw but kept walking. She had dealt with customers like him before, the kind who believed kindness was a weakness and wealth was the only thing that mattered. Langford wasn't done. He tilted his glass toward Salah's table, his smirk deepening. Look at him, sitting there like he belongs. And that waitress, acting like he's just another customer. I wonder if she even realizes who's paying her wages. The younger man at his table shifted uncomfortably. Come on, Richard. She's just doing her job. Oh, is she? Langford arched an eyebrow, glancing at Anna as she returned to Salah's table, setting his meal down with the same polite smile she gave every guest. Langford sneered. Pathetic! If she had any sense, she'd know who deserves real service in this place. Anna turned, locking eyes with him for the briefest moment, her smile faltering just slightly. It wasn't fear, it was something colder. Recognition. She had seen men like him before. And she knew exactly what was coming. Anna knew when someone was trying to bait her. She had worked in this industry long enough to recognize the quiet, deliberate cruelty that came from men like Richard Langford, the kind who used their money as a weapon, their words as a leash, expecting everyone around them to submit without question. She wasn't in the mood. As she cleared a nearby table, she caught his sneering tone again, just loud enough for Salah to hear. It's a shame, really. Some people are treated like royalty just for running up and down a field. Meanwhile, the real contributors to society are overlooked. His words dripped with arrogance, his smirk growing as he leaned back in his chair, sipping his wine like a man who believed himself untouchable. The two younger men at his table shifted uncomfortably, clearly unwilling to challenge him. Anna had heard enough. She moved with quiet confidence, approaching his table with the same polite composure she gave every guest. She placed the bill for his table down gently, meeting his gaze with unwavering calm. I apologize if your dining experience hasn't met your expectations, sir, she said, her voice smooth, professional. We strive to treat every guest with respect, regardless of their profession or status. Langford's smirk faltered just slightly. Anna continued, her eyes steady. I've found that true class isn't about wealth or power. It's about how we treat people when we think no one is watching. Silence. One of the young men at Langford's table coughed awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. A few nearby customers had started paying attention, sensing the quiet shift in the room. Langford's jaw tightened, his fingers curling slightly around the stem of his glass. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by someone he considered beneath him. His eyes flicked toward Salah, who remained composed, calmly watching the exchange with a quiet interest. Anna didn't break eye contact. She held her ground, her polite smile never wavering. Langford exhaled sharply through his nose, his smirk returning, though it was thinner now, forced. He chuckled, shaking his head. Cute speech, he muttered. I hope it's worth your tip. Anna didn't respond. She simply turned, walking away with the same grace and dignity she had arrived with. Salah, who had remained silent throughout, caught her eye as she passed his table. He gave her the slightest nod, subtle but unmistakably appreciative. Anna nodded back, saying nothing. But she knew deep down that this wasn't over. Not yet. The evening rush had slowed, the restaurant now bathed in a warm, golden glow as the last few tables finished their meals. Anna moved through the room with quiet efficiency, clearing plates, refilling glasses, doing what she had always done, her job. But she could feel it. That lingering weight in the air. The storm that hadn't passed. Salah had left minutes ago, slipping out without spectacle, leaving behind a generous tip and a quiet word of thanks. But even as he walked out the door, Anna knew her night wasn't over. Richard Langford sat at his table, his wine glass empty, his lips curled into a thin line. He had been waiting. With deliberate slowness, he raised a hand and gestured for the manager. The moment Anna saw her boss, Michael Reynolds, approach the table, her stomach twisted. She knew Langford's type, the kind of man who never let a slight go unanswered. Reynolds bent slightly at the waist, hands clasped in front of him, like a man ready to offer his best apology. Mr. Langford, I hope everything was to your satisfaction? Langford leaned back in his chair, drumming his fingers against the table. Not exactly, he said smoothly, his eyes flicking toward Anna like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. I had an issue with one of your staff members. Reynolds' expression tightened. Oh? Langford exhaled, shaking his head as if he were simply exhausted by the situation. Disrespectful, completely unprofessional. I come here for a certain level of service, and frankly, I didn't appreciate being lectured by a waitress. Anna felt the blood drain from her face. Reynolds turned to her, his expression unreadable. Anna, is this true? She lifted her chin, forcing herself to stay composed. I was only ensuring all guests were treated with the same respect, sir. Langford scoffed. Is that what we're calling it? Because to me it sounded a lot like insubordination. His smile didn't reach his eyes. And trust me, I know a thing or two about how businesses work. You let employees talk back to customers like that and you won't have a business for long. Reynolds hesitated. Anna could see the battle playing out in his head, the desire to be fair clashing against the cold, hard truth of survival. Langford leaned in slightly. If she stays, I don't come back, and I don't dine alone. Reynolds didn't need any more convincing. Anna, I'm sorry, he said, though there was no real regret in his tone, just resignation. I'm going to have to let you go. The words hit like a slap. Anna opened her mouth, then closed it. She could fight, she could argue, but it wouldn't change anything. The decision had already been made the moment Langford had called her over. She pulled off her apron with slow, measured movements, placing it neatly on the counter beside her. Every fiber of her being screamed to say something, to defend herself, to make them see reason. But she wouldn't give Langford the satisfaction. Instead, she turned, walking toward the door with her head held high. Langford chuckled softly as she passed. Smart choice. She didn't look back, but as she stepped out into the cold night, a single thought pulsed through her mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cold night air bit at Anna's skin as she stepped out onto the empty street, the soft click of the restaurant door closing behind her feeling heavier than it should have. Fired? Just like that. No warning, no second chance. She had walked into work today expecting a long shift, expecting the usual demanding customers, the stress, the exhaustion. She hadn't expected to walk out unemployed. Her feet moved on autopilot, taking her down the familiar path home, but her mind was still trapped in that restaurant, replaying everything over and over. Could she have handled it differently? Should she have just ignored Langford's comments, swallowed the insult, smiled and moved on like it didn't bother her? Maybe. But that wasn't who she was. A hot lump formed in her throat as the reality of it all sank in. She wasn't just losing a job. She was losing her rent money, her grocery money. The tiny savings she had built up were already stretched thin. Living paycheck to paycheck meant there was no safety net, no cushion to soften the blow. Her apartment was still a few blocks away, but she slowed her pace, unwilling to face the silence waiting for her inside. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another bill reminder, but something told her to look. A message. From Sarah, one of the newer waitresses at the restaurant. I saw what happened. I wish I could have said something. You didn't deserve that. Anna swallowed hard. She wasn't expecting kindness tonight. Another message followed. You did the right thing. Stay strong. A shaky breath escaped her lips. Maybe she had lost her job. Maybe she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing. She hadn't lost herself. Anna barely slept. She had tossed and turned for hours, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the restaurant, heard Langford's smug voice, felt the sting of Reynolds' indifferent apology. By the time the first rays of sunlight peeked through the thin curtains of her tiny apartment, exhaustion sat heavy in her bones, but sleep didn't come. With a sigh, she grabbed her phone from the nightstand, expecting to scroll through job listings, trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of her finances. Instead, she froze. Her notifications had exploded, missed calls, unread messages, dozens, no, hundreds of them. She blinked, her heart pounding as she clicked on the first one. It was from Sarah. Anna, have you seen this? You're all over the internet. Confused, she opened the link attached to the message. The video started playing immediately. It was grainy, shot from a low angle, but she recognized the scene instantly. The restaurant. Langford at his table, arrogance oozing from every gesture. The way he sneered when she stood up to him. The way the manager fired her without hesitation. Someone had filmed everything, and they had posted it. Anna's stomach twisted as she scrolled down. Thousands of comments. Thousands. This is disgusting. That waitress didn't deserve to lose her job for standing up to some entitled rich guy. Who is this Langford guy, the audacity, the ego? I hope he never gets another reservation anywhere. This is why people hate the elite. She was just being decent and he crushed her for it. Someone help her find a new job ASAP. She deserves better. Anna's hands trembled as she scrolled further. News outlets had picked up the story. Social media was running wild with it. She exhaled sharply, overwhelmed. She had lost everything last night, or at least she had thought she had. But now, the whole world was watching. Anna sat frozen on the edge of her bed, her phone gripped tightly in her hands. The screen was still flooded with notifications, her name now plastered across social media, news sites, and even morning talk shows. It didn't feel real. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been just another waitress struggling to make ends meet. Now, complete strangers were calling her brave, calling for justice, calling for change. But amidst the chaos, one message stood out. A text from an unknown number. Come to this address at noon, trust me. There was no name, no explanation. Just an address. Anna stared at it, her mind racing. This had to be a scam, right? Someone messing with her now that her story was viral. But what if it wasn't? What if this was an opportunity? She had no job, no backup plan, no reason to say no. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she finally typed back one word. Why? A few seconds later, 3 dots appeared, then a reply. Because you deserve better. Anna hesitated. She had no reason to trust this, but something deep inside her, some stubborn, desperate hope, pushed her to take the risk. At exactly noon, she arrived at the address, a sleek, modern building with dark-tinted windows. It didn't look like an office. It wasn't a restaurant. It didn't make sense. Her hands were clammy as she stepped inside. The receptionist barely looked up before gesturing toward a hallway. You're expected, she said with a knowing smile. Expected? Anna swallowed hard and walked forward, her heartbeat drumming against her ribs. The door at the end of the hall was slightly open. She pushed it gently, stepping inside. And there, sitting casually in one of the sleek leather chairs, was Mohamed Salah. Anna's breath caught in her throat. He looked up, smiling warmly. I was hoping you'd come. Anna stood frozen in the doorway, her breath shallow. Mohamed Salah sat across the room, his posture relaxed, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes, a look of genuine kindness. She had spent the last 12 hours reeling from the worst moment of her life, and now she was face to face with one of the most famous athletes in the world. It didn't make sense. Salah gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit. Her legs felt stiff as she moved forward, lowering herself onto the seat. She clasped her hands together to keep them from trembling. I don't understand, she admitted. Salah leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. I saw what happened, he said. The video. The way you stood up for me. Stood up for what was right, even when you didn't have to. Anna swallowed. She hadn't done it for recognition. She had done it because it had been the right thing to do. Salah's gaze didn't waver. That kind of courage isn't common, and it shouldn't cost you everything. Anna blinked rapidly, the weight of the past day pressing against her chest. It did, though, she said quietly. I lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Salah nodded as if he had already considered this. That's why I called you here. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? He leaned back, his expression unreadable for a moment before he spoke. I run a foundation, one that helps underprivileged communities, providing education, resources, and support to those who need it most. We've been expanding, and I need people who genuinely care. People who aren't afraid to stand up for others. Anna's pulse quickened. Salah's eyes locked onto hers. I want you to work with us. Anna stared at him, stunned. Wait, you're offering me a job? He smiled. Not just a job, a purpose. Her hands tightened in her lap. Just yesterday she had been taking orders, clearing plates, serving men like Langford who saw her as nothing. Now Salah was offering her something far greater than she had ever imagined. For the first time in hours, she let out a breath that didn't feel heavy. This wasn't just an opportunity, this was a second chance. Richard Langford was used to power. He was used to walking into any room and commanding respect, used to getting what he wanted with a snap of his fingers or the flick of a credit card. But today, for the first time in a long time, he felt something foreign creeping into his chest. Panic. It started that morning when he noticed his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first he assumed it was business, clients, meetings, the usual. But then he opened his email. Subject: shameful behavior, restaurant incident. Dozens of them. Some from people he didn't know, others from business partners he'd worked with for years. His name was everywhere, not in the way he liked. Then came the headlines. Wealthy businessman gets waitress, fired for standing up to him. The internet fights back. Public outrage grows as former employee speaks out against restaurant's discriminatory firing. Restaurant faces boycott after firing waitress who defended Mohamed Salah. Langford clenched his jaw, tossing his phone onto his desk. This was getting out of control. And it wasn't just him feeling the heat. The restaurant was drowning in it. Their social media pages were in flames, thousands of furious comments, negative reviews piling in by the second, calls from news outlets, protesters showing up outside. And, worst of all, empty tables. The manager, Michael Reynolds, had tried to contain the damage, but it was useless. By noon, he had no choice. Anna's phone rang. She recognized the number. She let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, a message popped up. Anna, this is Michael. I think we need to talk. Please, call me back. We want to make things right. Anna stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the call button. A week ago, she might have considered it, but now? She smiled softly to herself and put the phone down. Some doors weren't meant to be reopened. The office was nothing like the restaurant. No clinking glasses, no rushed orders shouted from the kitchen, no entitled businessmen snapping their fingers for attention. It was quiet, warm, filled with the kind of energy that didn't drain her but fueled her. Anna sat at her new desk, still trying to wrap her head around how much her life had changed in just a few days. No longer balancing trays or forcing smiles at people who saw her as nothing more than the person refilling their drinks. Now she was coordinating outreach programs, helping set up food drives, working with people who actually cared about making a difference. It didn't feel real, but it was. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up to see Mohamed Salah standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her with that quiet, knowing smile. How's the first day going? He asked. Anna exhaled a laugh. It still feels surreal. Salah nodded, stepping inside. You'll get used to it. She tilted her head. Why did you do this? He studied her for a moment before answering. Because people like you make the world better. You stood up when you didn't have to. You lost everything, but you didn't lose yourself. He gestured around the room. That's the kind of person we need here. Anna felt something tighten in her throat, something warm and overwhelming all at once. Salah glanced at his watch. I have to head out, but I wanted to make sure you were settled. She stood, shaking his hand. Thank you for everything. His grip was firm but kind. Just promise me one thing, he said, as he turned toward the door. What's that? He looked back at her. When someone else needs help, don't hesitate. She didn't. I won't. As he walked away, she let out a slow breath, turning back to her desk. No, she wasn't a waitress anymore. She was something more. And for the first time in a long time, she knew one act of kindness had changed everything.